We continue to expand our knowledge about the bank transactions in our business, and in this video I'm going to show you how to allocate and record customers' money received in your business's bank account with Sage Online Accounting. In my previous videos I've shown the various ways of getting bank transactions into the Sage accounting system. We looked at automatic bank feeds, PDF conversions, OFX and CSV file imports of bank statements to Sage Accounting. In this video, I'm dealing with the next step after you have imported all of those bank transactions. This step is the allocation of transactions to the correct account. I'm going to show you how easy it is to deal with bank deposits or money received in Sage. I'm going to reveal how to handle bank payments in later videos. If you follow the steps and the tips that I'm going to show you, you will find that doing the important task of processing customer bank receipts is actually easy to do with Sage. Let's start, shall we? Bank transfers have become the norm in business. Many, if not most, of your bank receipts are usually from customers paying you. In the cashless environment we are living in now, by far, if not all, customers make payments by some sort of a bank transfer. Banking checks have become basically redundant and abnormal for most businesses I came across these days. Receipts are instant, and for that reason I prefer to do only one transaction, and that is to allocate money received directly from the bank. By allocating directly from the bank, I skip a step of recording a receipt and seeking to match it to a bank transaction. The bank deposit or transfer amounts imported from the bank is the receipt. Not all customers pay exactly an invoice amount, as you will see in my example. Some pay a portion of an invoice, some pay a previous month's balance, some pay a rounded amount. The list of amounts paid goes on and on. Matching the customer bank receipts at the initial stages of processing bank receipts, which some accounting softwares require, is a waste of time. Sage makes provision for matching any receipt to a specific invoice, a balance, or a group of transactions. But that happens at the end of the transaction line and not at the initial stages of processing the transaction, like other accounting software I came across. This little distinction is important because this makes the processing directly from the bank data possible in Sage, which definitely saves time and results in efficiency and accuracy. How it works in practice will be clear later in the video when you see how I process the bank receipts in Sage Accounting. If you have a cash register in your business or cash receipt book, the process will be totally different than what I'm going to show you. Cash registers, etc. will be dealt with in future videos. Here I am logged into my demo Sage account, and I'm here in the workspace area of Sage. To find the bank transactions from this area, you search for the View Bank Transactions widget icon. And here it is. Click anywhere on the widget, which takes you directly to banking. It is important to choose the specific bank account that you want to process. Click on the empty field next to Bank or Credit Card. A list of all your bank accounts will be displayed. Select the relevant bank. Once you have selected the bank account, its balance will be displayed and also the number of transactions that needs to be reviewed next to it. Reviewed in this context means to allocate transactions to an account. The transaction rows are organized in field columns that look like a spreadsheet. The layout of the banking screen with the bank transactions can be amended according to your preferences. In future videos, I will show you exactly how that is done, but for now, we're going to roll with this layout as an example. The current column headings of transactions from left to right are, starting with the date of the transaction, the payee, the transaction description, which comes directly from the description of your bank, the type of transaction, where you want to allocate to. You have 5 options to choose from: an account, a customer, a supplier transaction, a transfer between bank accounts, and a VAT payment or receipt allocation. The next heading is making a selection from a drop-down list to select and categorize your transaction. A transaction reference as a unique identifier of the transaction, which is normally created automatically during the bank import process. choosing VAT type for each transaction if your business is VAT registered, then the bank amount spent or received, and the REC tick box is the shortened for reconciled or not. Lastly, the action buttons, which will be discussed later in this video while I am doing the processing. For the purpose of this demo, I only imported bank receipts and not bank payments, so that we don't get confused between the payments and receipts. But it is important to note that you can just as easily sort your bank transactions by the received column, which will then group all your bank receipts together. As I scroll down through the transactions, you can see that certain transactions have an orange unallocated income description, and others are typed in black font. The black font indicates that these transactions have already been allocated. Since I have not done any allocations yet, it can only mean that I have created the bank allocation rule previously. A bank rule does a number of things, but most important, ensures the automatic allocation of a receipt based on the identification criteria of the rule. Sage bank rules are a massive time saver that can elevate your efficiency to the next level. In an ideal Sage world, you want to create rules for each transaction. By creating rules, all your receipts are allocated automatically during the bank statement import phase. It is really easy to create a rule, and I'm going to show you how it is done later in the video. And you will see exactly how bank rules makes accounting easy. I've reached the bottom of the page, and you can see that there are 2 pages and 99 transactions that need to be dealt with. You have 3 buttons. A save button. I use the save button often because I hate to redo work, which can happen if the internet connection drops and I lose connection. The mark selected as reviewed button. This button moves selected transactions from the new transaction space where we are right now to the reviewed transactions area. Mark all as reviewed, which will move all the transactions to the reviewed space, and it is not something you want to do when you still have unallocated transactions. Let me explain the new and reviewed transactions a bit more and also give you a handy tip. I use these 2 different tabs to organize and manage my work. We are now in the new transaction screen, and in my mind, it means that I must look at these transactions, ensure that they get allocated correctly, perform certain actions on them, like configuring a rule that will help me in future, and once I'm done with the transaction, I move it to the reviewed transactions area, where they are stored and kept, and I have thus completed my work on them. Once all the transactions in the new transactions tab have been dealt with and moved to the reviewed, I'm finished with the process. As we progress through the video, you will see how I apply it practically, and it will make complete sense to you. Let's start processing these transactions. In the first transaction line, we received 180 Rand in our bank, dated 28 June 2022 from CT Tour. I'm going to select Customer and the type. This tells the system that I will need information about customers' accounts. In the selection drop-down list, I now need to find the CT Tour customer account and select it. The reference given by the bank import is fine to identify the transaction. A receipt from the customer should be a no VAT transaction because VAT is payable on the invoice and not also when the money is received from the customer. The downward arrow opens more options on a transaction, and I use it mostly to account for discounts allowed and to allocate analysis codes, if applicable. In this example, there are 3 analysis codes. Departments, where I select the surfboards. Area, where I select Cape Town. Project. I'm not going to use it as there are no projects added. I could have also expanded on the transaction and added comments if I wanted to. The tick mark under the REC, which is the abbreviation for reconciliation, means that the transaction reconciles or agrees with the bank statement. As this was a bank import and not a manual entry, it should be ticked. The next icon with the 3 dots is where you can set up a bank rule, here and now, while you have the transaction information on hand. Next to the rule icon, the left and right arrow is to split one receipt amount into different amounts and then allocate the separate parts to its different accounts. An example of this is where a holding company pays one amount for its different branches, and you have to split the receipt among the different customer accounts. Then you can add an attachment to this transaction line. The next icon is to allocate the receipt to a customer invoice or balance. In other cloud accounting programs, this function is called matching the receipt to the customer invoice. The green plus icon is to add a transaction line below the one you are currently working in. The red minus icon, which is the last action button of the transaction line function, is to delete the whole transaction entry from the bank register. I hope you have noticed the description of each button appearing as a guide as I was hovering over each button. I am first going to see if I can allocate this receipt to an existing invoice before I do anything else by clicking on the allocate icon, which is the arrow line going up and down. When I click on it, invoices on this particular customer account will appear. There is no invoices to allocate this receipt to, not under the paid invoices or any unpaid invoices, as you can see. This is strange, and it means it is either an error or a prepayment from a customer. I'm going to save this action, although I did not perform any allocations. Normally, if I encounter an abnormality like this, I quickly investigate it further, which is something I can easily do in Sage. For that, I'm going to view this customer's ledger account. I love customer ledgers because they are packed with all the information you need. I was dumbstruck to find that some of Sage's competitors are unable to give you a proper customer's or supplier's ledger. To find a customer's ledger, you go to the top navigation bar. Under Customers, down to Reports, to the right to Customer Transactions, and down to Customer Transactions, which is the ledger in accounting language, and click on it. In the Customer Transactions report, you can specify the date range and select customers or a range of customers, or select a particular customer that you need detailed transactions on. I'm going to choose and select CT Tour and View Report. The only transaction displayed is the receipt I've just allocated. I'm going to assume that this is a prepayment for a sales order. This example shows you how easy it is to deal with prepayments by customers and to have it reflected on their account. I've dealt with a different cloud accounting software where you could not record a deposit from a customer without an invoice. The prepayment had to be allocated to a temporary account and could only be cleared once an invoice had been created. With 1 or 2 invoices it is fine, but when a business requires a deposit before an order can be executed, it is a nightmare to clear that temporary account. Those clients have since switched over to Sage Accounting once they have seen how prepayments are easily dealt with in Sage. Let's go back to allocating bank transactions, and this time we use the route from the top navigation bar to Banking, down to Transactions, to the right to Banking, and click on it. Once back at the bank transactions, the first thing I want to do is to set up a bank allocation rule. In order to do that, click on the 3 bullet point icon. The bank statement mapping rules menu will open. In the first field, the reference used by your customer when making the deposit to your bank is automatically reflected. This description will be used in future by Sage as identifying and linking a bank transaction to a particular customer's account. I would encourage you to set text that are repeated and used by your customer as reference over and over when making a payment to you. For that reason, an invoice number will not work because each invoice gets a unique invoice number and there is no set rule that can be linked to a particular customer. In this example, I only use a customer name as reference. A unique customer code could have worked as well. The second and third fields are optional. In the second field, you can add the payee name, for example, when it is different from the customer's account name. If you fill in the third field, it will overwrite the description that appears in a bank transaction line. I don't use this function a lot, but let's fill it in to show you the effect, and maybe you can use it in your own environment. To save the bank rule setting, click on Save. You can see the payee field is now filled in, and the description field has changed. The payee and description fields will always be applied in future when the bank rule picks up a transaction from this customer. when a bank rule is activated and applied to a transaction, the 3 bullet points icon turns orange. Let's see if any transaction has now been allocated via the bank rules mapping to the current bank transactions. Yes, there it is. You can see the line's font turned blue as well. We have now identified and allocated all the money received in the bank from City Tour automatically by setting up the rule, which will be applied in future and making our work and time spent allocating bank transactions less. What you see here is letting automation help you make accounting work quick and easy. I'm going to scroll back to the top to allocate the next transaction. I follow the same procedure. Change the type of transaction to customer, search and select the customer's account, complete the analysis code, allocate the transaction to an outstanding invoice. Like with the previous transaction, there are no invoices to allocate this receipt against. My fifth step is to set up the bank rule. As a side note, be aware that Sage calls this process in the first field to enter the text to map the description in your bank statement to a customer account. I'm going to fill in the payee field and the description field as well and save the bank rule mapping. With the third transaction line, I'm going to follow the same process. The only difference is that with this receipt, there are invoices against which the receipt can be allocated to. For that, I'm going to click on the allocate icon that can be found between the attachment and the green plus icon under the actions column heading. Now you can see how outstanding invoices are displayed in the allocation menu. I find the invoice number that matches my receipt and click on the allocate checkbox. Then press save. As with the previous transaction, I'm going to repeat the process of setting up the bank statement mapping rules, but this time I'm not going to complete the payee and the description fields because I'm happy with the bank statement descriptions and press save. I'm going to fast track the recording and process all the receipt transactions. When I get to the section where I'm performing a new function, I'm going to slow down and explain what it is all about. You can follow along as I work through this. With the cash deposit, I'm going to change the bank statement mapping rules by changing the payee to cash sales and the description to till 1. To split the receipt, click on the icon with the left and right arrow next to the rule icon. A sub-highlighted screen will open. In the first line, the existing transaction amount is reflected. Complete the second line. For example, this amount must be split between cash and Breaking Waves customer. As you type the amount in the field, you will see the payment total changes as well as the remainder, which is there to help you to balance the amount. Sage will not allow a split to be saved unless it balances to the amount received in your bank. I need to change the cash amount to 500 Rand, cash received. The remainder is 0 and the payment total agrees to the split total, and now I can save the split transactions. You can see that the type and selection fields now read split, and that is how you will identify any split transactions if you review your bank transactions. If you ever need to add a transaction manually within your set of transactions, you can do so by clicking on the green plus button next to the allocate transaction button. Sage will add an empty line below the current line, which you can type and complete manually. Firstly, I'm going to fill in the date. You can also copy data from other fields. I'm copying the cash sales from the previous payee transaction line with Command C and paste it with Command V. And I'm doing the same with copying the till 1 description as my transaction description. The type is customer again. Select the cash customer. Copy and paste the reference from above and change the last numbers. Enter the receipt amount. Match the receipt to an invoice in the allocate invoice screen. I'm matching a 500 Rand receipt to 287 Rand 50 invoice. As I'm clicking to match, Sage displays the portion of the received amount that still needs to be allocated, a R212.50 in the unallocated amount field. The amount received column displays how much of the receipt has been allocated to a particular invoice. Click on Save to save the allocation. After creating a few bank mapping rules, you will find that more receipts have been automatically allocated to customer accounts, as revealed by the blue font transactions in my case. I'm going to continue with allocations and mapping. Once you have completed bank rules, you are basically left with checking and matching the receipt by allocating it to outstanding invoices. Earlier in the video, I explained about the Mark Selected as Reviewed option. You can also find the same action button at the top of the section. As I click on a checkbox next to the date of a transaction, the View buttons above the column headings become visible. I'm selecting all the transactions I've completed and want to move to the Reviewed section. I work my way all the way to the bottom of the page and then click on Mark Selected as Reviewed. You can see that although I have marked all the transactions as reviewed, why are there still transactions that are completed and allocated, as we can see by looking under the Selections column? It is because as the transactions are marked as reviewed and moved over to Reviewed transactions, the transaction grid is filled with transactions from other pages. I carry on with allocating and matching bank receipts until all the transactions left are unallocated income. I'm going to carry on with the process of allocating bank receipts to customer accounts. Another great feature of Sage is the ability to sort the banking transactions by column heading. To show you the effect of that, I'm sorting the data by the description column. You can see that all the different receipts from a customer are grouped together based on the bank description. As soon as the bank mapping rule is applied, all the transactions for that particular customer are allocated. Have a look at the bank rule effect on Inner Pool customer account. I'm doing the same bank rule with the next customer receipt from Jaws to show you the effect again. I'm also using the top Mark as Reviewed button to move receipts that I'm finished with. I'm going to repeat the process with the rest of the customer receipts. Here we are at the last group of customer transactions that I'm finishing off with. You can perform an action on all the transactions in the new transaction screen by scrolling up to the top of the screen. Next to the date in the headings bar, click on the Actions tick box and all the transactions are selected. Then I can mark all the transactions as reviewed by clicking on the button. There are no bank receipts left to process and I click on the Save Changes. Let's take a peep at the completed bank receipts processing by clicking on the Reviewed Transactions. This is where you will go in future if you need to look at how transactions have been classified in the bank and in case you need to change something. You can refine your search for transactions by using the date field to display the transactions for a particular period defined by you. I'm going to search for all the transactions from the 1st of July to the 31st of July and click on Refresh. You can also refine your search by just one day, and that is the easiest way to find a bank transaction when you know on which day it occurred. My work here is done, and so will be yours after completing the processing of customer bank receipts and clearing all the bank receipts under the New Transactions tab in Sage Accounting. If you have not worked with Sage Accounting before, I hope that this video has given you a fair idea of what processing customer bank receipts in Sage Accounting is all about. And if you are an existing Sage user, maybe you have picked up a few shortcuts and tips to improve your efficiency and making admin tasks a breeze. Thank you for watching, and if you like the information, please subscribe to our channel to be notified of our next video.